All right. Hello and welcome to the January installment of our Brandcasters client webinar, client call. I think we call it client call, modern call, being online. And, for those of you that may be new and seeing this for the first time, this is something we do at least once a month, where usually it's me and Tracy. Although today Tracy is at a conference in Florida, so I'm doing this alone today. Where we talk about a specific subject, take a little deeper dive into something that hopefully will be of value and interest to you as a brandcaster. And then we also open it up to any of you that are participating live to ask any questions you may have on any subject related to, brandcasting, podcasting, the blogging, social media things, anything related to the services that we provide and the efforts that you're engaged in for digital marketing. And then we also do record this. So those of you watching this at a recording on our website at a later date, obviously you won't be able to ask any questions, but hopefully it'll still be of value to you. So with that, I'm going to start and with the subject we picked for today, and that is going to be your recording environment. And really the focus of this is going to be for you as a brandcaster, podcaster, videocaster, what you can do to improve your own recording environment, make it the best that it can be. And some of these things are also going to apply to your guests. And I know you have a lot less control over the environment of a guest that you're recording remotely over the internet, whether that's through Zoom or Skype, using Zencaster, which you can use with either Zoom or Skype if you want to. We have hopefully trained each of you, or you were already trained before you came to work with us, on the best software and equipment possible that you can use for recording your show. And the modern equipment and modern software does a lot to help make your recording the best that it can be. But the reality is your environment, everything around you, the room that you're talking and recording in, also has a lot to do with the quality of recording. And I want to go through some of those things today. Some of you that may be very seasoned podcasters at this point, maybe you're all set and, maybe this isn't as critical for you. But I think even if you have been podcasting for a long time, there's a few tips in here that may be helpful to you. Maybe when you're on the road and podcasting, you're not in your environment that's prepared, or some tips that you can also share with your guests. Or I've had it happen where I get on for a podcast interview with a guest and their environment sounds horrible. And it's almost borderline, wow, can we even record this? Well, at least you might be able to give them a few tips and see if they can do one or two things to help improve the recording conditions to make it just a little better before you go and spend that half an hour, 45 minutes, or even an hour recording with them. So, hopefully there'll be some tips here to help all of you, whether you are relatively new at this or have been doing it for quite a while. So let's talk about there are two major factors outside of equipment, which I'll touch on a little bit later. But outside of equipment, in your recording environment, there's two major factors that are going to affect the quality of your recording, and that is ambient noise and reflective sound. So let's talk about ambient noise first. Ambient noise, I want to talk about that because it's very hard for us to remove in terms of in the production process when we edit when our audio engineers, that's what we have, when our audio engineers edit your show, there is very little that we can do to remove ambient noise from your recording, because usually it's going on in the background behind, in the environment, in front of you, behind you, around you, while you're speaking. And there are some filters and compressors we can apply in the audio editing process to try to reduce that ambient noise. But if it's happening at the same time when you're talking, there's very little that we can do to remove it. So let's talk about what some of those are. Now, this is the recording environment right here that Tracy and I use every week to record our podcasts. And we have several different podcasts we're recording, and we're doing probably from 25 to 30 episodes a month. So it's a lot. But we have learned over time, we really risk having bad recordings if we record on a Wednesday afternoon. And why is that? Well, here in our neighborhood, Wednesday afternoon is trash day. And you would hear the loud engine of the trash truck at times, or what's worse, when the truck, comes past our building and turns around, it ends up backing up and you hear that loud beep, beep, beep of the truck when it's in reverse. That's the kind of ambient noise that I just I can never accept in any of the recordings of my show. I've had it happen too, where I've called guests who were in New York City in the summertime and they're in a neighborhood with an older building and maybe they don't have central air conditioning. And so they've got the window open in their environment when we're recording them. And I'm hearing, ambulances driving down the street, all these sorts of things. I'm like, wow, we got to try to improve this at least for 20 or 30 minutes while we're conducting this interview, and close the window, have them move away from the window. Is there an interior room they could get into? Something to try to reduce that ambient noise. And I understand in the middle of New York City, there's a certain amount of white noise that's there that you just can do nothing about. And that's unfortunate. But you need to try to improve that. So trash truck, that's one of my big things. The ambulance and the general traffic in New York City or any big urban destination, that's an issue. Windows open, definitely a no-no. Would not do that. The HVAC system in your environment. Now you can see up behind me that there is a register in the ceiling for our HVAC system. And we've learned over time, because we've done a lot of test recordings, and I would encourage you to do this, especially if you're new at it. If you have an HVAC system, whether it's in the summer with air conditioning or the winter with your heat, make sure that when that kicks on, because it'll kick on randomly whenever it wants to, that noise is not going to come into your recording, and that you won't hear sort of a difference. Because if it's a noise that's very, very low and it's constant, that would be preferable to a constant shift. And it makes it hard for our engineers to edit if, AC is off or heat is off and there's really no noise. And then it turns on and you've got this low hum that's constantly like, what is that? Where's it coming from? Again, very little we can do to eliminate it. We can try and improve it. But if there's sort of a delta of when it's on, it's different than when it's off, that's something that you should look into and test and do a recording. Just start recording it and have someone go and turn the heat up a few more degrees so it kicks on while you're recording. Record an audio, and if you want to send it to us, we can evaluate it and say, yeah, that's really an issue, or you know what, you could hear it for yourself. Do you really notice it or not? But at the same time, you're wondering, is there anything we can do about it? We'll be happy to do a little test edit, put some filters on it and check it out. So HVAC is something you want to check into. Also, if you've most of you are going to use your laptop computer to do your recording, as I'm doing right now on this Zoom webinar call. And some computers have a pretty loud fan. I've actually had it happen where I've been interviewing a guest, or even using someone else's computer if I'm, off in another location to record something. And the fan on the computer will kick on when it gets really hot. And you'd be surprised, depending on, where your microphone is in relation to your laptop, it can actually pick up that fan, and that noise can be really annoying and create some of that white ambient noise that can be hard to deal with. So make sure you're aware of your computer. I know as we get more and more modern computers that have solid state hard drives, you don't have the hard drive spinning up as much, and maybe you don't have a fan as much, but I still hear it on a lot of computers today. It's something you want to be aware of and be prepared for. Whether you can eliminate it or not, at least maybe you can be prepared for it and try to deal with it, or learn what else is going on with your computer that you might be able to turn off other background programs and reduce your CPU usage or your hard drive usage going on in that at that time, so that hopefully while you're recording, that fan won't kick on. So, think about that as well. And another thing I want to mention, this isn't, it's a part of your environment, but it's really more a part of your practices as a podcaster when you're interviewing somebody. A lot of you may have noticed in Zencastr, it has the ability for you to type little notes to yourself as you're recording, like, oh, somebody coughed. Oh, make a note of that. Or, you just want to take general notes of something that your guest is saying that you want to remember to include in the notes you give us to edit your podcast, whether it's something that needs to be edited or it's just a note for a link or a website, or maybe your thought, oh my gosh, I have a photograph of that something the guest just talked about. I want to remember to include that photograph when I upload my episode request so that, Brandcasters uses that photograph in the blog post. And that's great. You definitely want to make note of that. But what I do not want you to do is to type it on your keyboard. I'm hoping that my mic is going to pick this up, that, I'm typing on the keyboard. That's kind of a rookie error and something I would highly recommend you don't do while you're interviewing somebody. Even though you may be thinking, well, I'm using Zencastr, and Zencastr is recording a separate track for me than it is for my guest across the internet. And that is true. It should be. And most of the time is. But you also, at times, will have a situation where the guest, although we always recommend that the guest be listening with earbuds so it separates what is coming through their audio output from what's going in their microphone. Sometimes you'd be surprised their computer settings are not always perfect, and you can't always control that situation. So it can even happen even if you have a separate recording. So anything you type here while you're recording, and you don't type while you're saying something, and you're thinking, well, if I'm typing when the guest is talking, that may be okay. A lot of time it may be, but there are just some situations when it won't be okay. And you will actually hear your typing coming in through your guest's recording through their microphone, and we just cannot eliminate that noise from the recording as much as we would like to. So I highly recommend use a pen or a pencil and have a pad of paper beside you here, because writing most of the time, that's quiet enough. That's not going to rise to the level of ambient noise that your mic will pick up, or certainly it won't pick up through your mic, go through your guest speaker into their mic. It's highly unlikely. I mean, it might be when you are, I'm going to do it here just so you hear it, when you're, flipping the page, you might hear that. That would even be a noise I would want to avoid. I would highly recommend just tell your guest, hey, hold on 1 second, James. I'm going to flip my page and I'm going to continue. And obviously that whole section our editors can cut out completely, but highly recommend any notes that you want to take, you write down with a pen and paper, because even that would be, maybe we don't want to call it ambient noise, but it's certainly, noise clutter that we don't want in our recordings. Okay. So we talked about ambient noise. Now let's talk about reflective noise. And here's where I'm going to have some tips for you for your actual physical environment. Okay. Reflective sound is just what it is. We're talking now not about outside noise created. We're talking about the noise that the noise is the wrong word. The sound waves that are coming out of your mouth. And in my case, Tracy and I were co-hosts, out of her mouth. Both of the sound waves coming out of our mouths are coming out into this environment. Obviously, they're being picked up by the microphone right here, but they are going everywhere. Sound is really, it's really, if you think of it as like a fluid, it is. Air is a fluid, and the sound waves are going through it, and they're going everywhere. What you don't want is for those sound waves to bounce right back at you. And it creates an echo and creates a sound quality that is horrible. So the worst possible environment you could be in has a lot of parallel walls. And even your orientation within your environment, even if you had to be in a square room that has, parallel walls here and parallel walls in front and behind you, if you are sitting with your head in a chair and with your face or mouth pointed straight at that wall, that's the worst situation. It'd actually be better if you could change your orientation to be more angled at an odd angle, not even, maybe not even exactly straight into a corner, but sort of anything that you would think of as kind of off angle, not straight on, would really be helpful. But the worst environment is like a square room made of cement or cinder block walls and a tile floor. That is going to be a terrible recording environment, that it doesn't matter if there's no ambient sound, even the quality of your own voice and how it's reflected off of those hard surfaces and comes back to your microphone. It's going to produce an audio quality, even if you have a good quality microphone, that is going to be worse than it could be if you moved and recorded in a different environment. So I want to talk about some, let's say you don't have an ideal environment. And even though, let's say it's your home office or another room in your home, but you have a home that has hardwood floors and, you've got a lot of windows on the walls that are beside you or in front of you. What can you do about that? Because that is an environment that's going to produce a lot of sound reflection, and it's not going to be ideal. So what can you do? Well, curtains on windows are a huge help. If you have drapes, or maybe you don't in the environment, but if you, and I'm not asking you to go spend a whole heck of a lot of money changing your entire environment, but if you could add some curtains, even though if you don't want them most of the time and they're pushed to the side, but if you pull them across the window while you're recording, that will do a lot for sound absorption and really reducing the amount of reflection that's going to come back at you. Environments in, whether it's a real office space or a home environment that have wall-to-wall carpeting are going to be a lot more friendly, an awful lot more friendly to good quality audio recording. Wall-to-wall carpet is in fact recommended. If you can find a room that has wall-to-wall carpeting, has a lot of curtains on the walls. Up here behind me is actually a fabric tack board surface. All that stuff pinned up isn't pinned into the hard wall. We've installed in this environment a couple of different fabric wrapped, I think it's Homosote or something. It's a very soft material. And even that is going to help absorb sound and reflect less of it than the normal hard wall will. In front of me, I've got a long distance to other parts of this office space, and there's a lot of carpet and there's a lot of sound absorbing things. Even bookcases in parts of your room with books in them, you might think, well, books are all hard. It's not soft like fabric or carpet. That's true, it's not. But even bookcases, there's so many little different facets going on between the heights of books and the depths of books and other, knickknacks or tchotchkes that you have on your bookcase. All of that is going to absorb and reflect sound in all sorts of different ways that it won't bounce right back at your microphone. So, the more stuff you have in your environment, really the better that environment is going to be, and better the sound quality will be. I want to, I'm going to turn the page on my notes here because I have an outline of some things I wanted to talk to you. So since this is a live recording and we don't really edit these videos, you're going to hear it. So I'm just addressing the elephant in my audio room here. Okay, so actually I want to tell you a little story. I hope you don't mind if I tell you a little story about something that actually happened that I helped my father on a project. My father is a musician. And in addition to being a musician, he's been a music teacher his whole career. And when I was, I think in college, I would think, maybe I was even a teenager, and because I didn't live with my dad, I visited him. He wanted to build a recording studio. This is pre-podcasting. So that podcast didn't even exist yet. He wanted to build a recording studio because he's a musician, and one of the things they were teaching students in his curriculum was about recordings, and they would make audio recordings, recording, music tracks and things like that. And the environment that he was given at this school was a block wall rectangular room, and it was not a good environment. So he and I built an actual recording booth. The reason I want to mention this is I want to share with you sort of what we did to do it on the cheap, on a budget. And it could be like a Saturday project or a weekend project for sure, if you ever want to do this in your own environment. And if you have an environment where you're going to record most of the time that has a hard, reflective environment for sound, you might want to consider doing something like this. That's why I thought I would mention it. So we built, just with some, material from your local Home Depot or Lowe's, a combination of some 2x4s and some plywood. And then we used, well, before I tell you what we used, I'll tell you what you would do. Let's say right here at this desk, if I had a generally hard environment, I'm speaking in this direction toward the camera, and you can't see what's on the other side of the camera, right? But let's say I have these hard walls, and I know I'm going to do most of my recording in this space, and I want to set it up so I have a better acoustic environment that's going to absorb more sound. I can make a little, I would say L-shaped, and it can be hinged if you want, but L-shaped structure with 2x4s. That's, maybe let's say I'm going to make it 5 feet tall, so it comes up over my head, goes down to the floor, stands by itself. It's something I can fold flat and stick in a corner when I don't need it. But when I'm going to record, I'm going to open it up and stick it in front of me, so that the sound coming out of my mouth, going generally in this direction away from me, is not just going to reflect right back and be recorded in my mic. So build a little 2x4 and plywood structure. And then this is what my dad and I used. We went and got, you see them at Costco all the time. When you buy a large volume of eggs, they have these egg crates that are made out of that same material you might find when you go to the coffee shop or Starbucks or any other coffee shop where you're going to carry 4 cups. It's made out of pressed paper. And it's very soft. It's very sound absorbing. Well, so with the eggs, it's even better, because I think it holds like, a dozen eggs by a dozen eggs. You get this big square thing of egg crate, right? And we just stapled that, series of them, because my dad worked at a school, and it actually was a school where people lived, and they had, cafeteria and all that. So they had tons of these egg crates he was able to get for free. But even if you bought them, they're pretty cheap to buy. Staple them to it or tack them into it. We spray painted them black just so that, it was all pretty uniform in color. And that's a great sound absorbing surface. Even if you were to put, call it like a baffle is one word you might use for it, but just a temporary wall structure, a portable structure in front of you that you can speak toward, that's not going to reflect that sound back. Now, I did find out that even if you want to, put a little bit of money into it, and on your environment, like maybe on part of the wall beside you, in front of you, maybe even behind you where you record on a regular basis, you can buy a 48 pack of these foam wedges or baffles, if you will, that's actually made of foam, probably the same material that's really right here on my on the cover for my microphone. They call this a windscreen sometimes, even though there's no wind in here, right? But you can get some foam squares made of that for a 48 pack for about $100. So it's a pretty modest investment to be able to put some things in your environment. Maybe it's just your ceiling over your desk is really hard, right? You don't have a sound absorbing ceiling, but you could put some of those up on the ceiling above you. You could put them up there with like command strips or something that's removable. It's not permanent, and it's going to help absorb some sound in your environment and make it a little better. So if you're going to do this a lot on a regular basis, there are things you can do to improve your environment. And if you'd like some suggestions from us, just write into us, give us a ring. We'll be happy to talk to you about it. And just one more thing as an example. Let's say you really had a very special recording you wanted to make, and your environment just wasn't ideal. A lot of homes, especially newer homes, have a walk-in closet. And I just want to use that as an example. A walk-in closet is really an ideal sound booth environment. I know, sitting in it may not be all that fun. There's no windows, it's just clothing hanging all around. But my goodness, all that clothing hanging on the racks around you is going to absorb all the sound. You'll have almost no reflective sound whatsoever in that environment. So just keep that in mind as a and especially when you're, maybe in someone else's environment and need to record something, that may be a good place you could go if you need to record something. So let's talk about being on the road, because I know a lot of you, like, Tracy and I do, we travel quite a bit, and occasionally we may want to interview somebody while we're on the road, or we just need to keep recording while we're on the road because we've got a schedule and, we got to keep producing podcasts on a regular basis. So let's talk about environments on the road. Actually, most hotel rooms are not the worst environment in the world to record in. They have pretty much all have wall-to-wall carpet, and in, nearby the desk that they provide you to record, there's a bed with a comforter on it. There's pillows in the room. There's usually a sofa or some other kind of upholstered chair. And this is actually not the worst environment in the world. I would recommend you don't sit at the desk right at that wall. You sort of turn yourself to an angle or maybe even away from that wall and speak out toward the bed if you can. But you can use that kind of environment. And with the software that we've, hopefully trained you all in, or that most of you use anyway, and if you bring your nice, decent microphone with you on the road, which doesn't take too much space, and have the little windscreen on it, that's going to do a lot to help your environment. You probably want to make sure, again, the HVAC system in that hotel room is such that it's not going to kick on while you're talking. And if that means hopefully you can turn it off. If you can't turn it off, you may be able to at least change the temperature either up or down so that during the time you're recording it won't turn on. And you really want to pull the curtains across that window that's there in that hotel room. And there's always heavy draped curtains in a hotel room to block out the light so you can sleep. So again, a hotel room is not a bad environment. Highly recommend, you can actually use that environment. Even if you have a guest and you may need to bring them into the room and you're both talking into one mic, that's still, wouldn't be the worst situation in the world. And I know some of you do that. I've done it. And so it can work pretty well. But some of the most difficult environments to record in are going to be outdoors or in conference halls. If you're out at a conference, an event at a hotel that's in a big ballroom and a lot of people, then you're going to have that ambient noise problem in all those situations. We have a different video within our video series about using different kinds of recording equipment on the road. Some of you have purchased some recording equipment so you can record on the road, and there are certain settings with those where you can record outdoors and change the settings so that the ambient noise is not as big a factor and it isn't recorded as much. So, I would encourage you to check out some of those other videos, or if you're interested in purchasing that type of equipment, reach out to us and let us know. We can certainly help you with that. If you're going to do a lot of that type of recording, it might be a good idea. So let's see. I'm trying to think what else. I think I've gone through most of my notes on this subject for your recording environment. Modern equipment, modern software does a lot to help you. And I think the worst part is really your guests, that you can't control their environment. And even though we've provided, hopefully each of you, and if not, let us know, we will provide it to you with guest prep recommendations that, you can email them ahead of time for having the best environment and making sure their equipment is the best that it can be, or being used in the best way possible to make their recording the best quality it can be. Some guests you're going to record and this audio is fantastic. Maybe they are already a podcaster, or maybe they just happen to have the right environment, and that's great. Other times you're going to have to deal with environments that are not ideal and recording conditions for your guests that are not ideal. As long as it's not super annoying, like, the ambulance going by the open window, which I actually had happen once with a guest. And, as long as you're not going to have that type of stuff, I think your audience, for the most part, will accept the guest having an environment and a recording quality that is less than ideal, especially if what they're talking about is a really great subject, or the information you're bringing your audience or you're sharing with them is of value. They'll forgive some recording environment that's not ideal. But to the extent that you can, preparing your guest, and hopefully they read the prep email and do prep ahead of time. To the extent that you can prep them and take a little time at the beginning of your call to try and improve it, if it's not ideal, it would go a long way to making for a better recording. And that's another thing Tracy and I do. I want to just mention that when we book a recording for a podcast, we book an hour of time with them on our calendar and their calendar. And that's not that we expect to record them for a solid hour. Most of our interviews would range from 25 to 45 minutes. And that's generally what we allow for. And we don't predetermine the length of an interview. We just, most of the time, that will cover it for us. And we let the interview go as long as it needs to until it feels complete to us. But if you book an hour of time, that allows you a good 10 to 15 minutes when you connect with your guest over Zoom or Skype or however you're doing it, to be able to then troubleshoot any technical problems, whether it's with getting them connected to Zencastr or making sure they have the right microphone setting chosen in their Zencastr or Skype software or in Zoom. Some of those technical things, you want a little time to work that out, but it also can help. And that's reminding me of another environmental tip. I mean, if you really have a bad environment situation and you really need to improve it for a recording, you've got to do right there, whether it's, just you and your environment, let's say hotel room or, anywhere that you might be, even going and getting a towel, an extra towel from a bathroom or a blanket, draping it over the desk that your computer's on and your mic is on, or draping it in your lap. You can even throw a blanket over your head and over your computer. And that is going to absorb sound and keep it from reflecting back at you. It'll stop it before it gets to a hard concrete wall, if that's all you have right then. I mean, there are sort of these, I would call them really not ideal situations, but there are some, I would call them, and maybe we'll call it a ninja tactic here. If you really got to get that recording done and you got a bad environment, if you got a towel or a blanket, you can actually change that environment and create a decent recording in a really unfortunate environment. So, keep that in mind. And so this is about the point where I would normally take any questions from any participants that I don't think I have any live at the moment on this call. So any of you that do have any questions watching this in a recording, anything you're wondering about, well, I have this environment or I have this condition, then, just reach out to us at Brandcasters and via email or, whatever method you prefer. And we'll be happy to answer some questions about that environment. But hopefully, especially if you're new to this, you can figure out an environment that is going to work for you on a regular basis. I actually had a new brandcaster who's coming on board with us. I was actually on a Skype call with him briefly this morning before recording this. And we were talking on a different subject, but I noticed in his environment, I mentioned it to him, I was like, wow, you've got a lot of tack boards on the wall in this room. And your audio sounds really good. He was just talking to me on, I think, his iPad at the time, just the mic on his iPad. I was like, wow, this sounds pretty good. And I said, hey, are you going to record in this environment? He says, well, I hadn't thought about it, but I certainly can. This is in my office. It's a room in my office that I come to. It's got a lot of soft material on the walls. And I said, well, hey, it sounds like a great environment, even without a good mic. So you might want to use that environment. So, think about your environment, plan out your space. You can always improve it, make it the best it can be. It's going to make the quality of your show sound better, make it easier for our audio engineers to edit and produce the best quality audio for you, which your guests are going to really enjoy. If any of you listening to this have not listened to the recent Feed Your Brand podcast episode featuring Athena Rosette as the guest, she is someone that, we helped train in podcasting. It's coming up on 2 years ago now. She really is very sensitive to the audio quality of her podcast. And, if that's an area of interest for you, you might go listen to that interview we did published recently. And it was a great interview. And I didn't even realize how sensitive she had become to good quality audio. So you can see what happens to somebody who's almost 2 years in, who really cares about the quality of the recordings of their podcast. And you can hear the things that she does to make sure that, the quality of her show is the best it can be. A lot of it is, environmentally, some things we're talking about, but she even talks about some other things that actually now really bother her when she listens to other podcasts that are not done as well as hers. So that can be an illuminating interview for you to listen to if you haven't already. So, all right, I do not have any more questions as of this time. So I'm going to sign off for today. This is our late January client call. Hope you're getting something good out of it. And, if you can plan ahead, I know this call, I think, was not announced as early as a lot, and I apologize for that. We do these usually the last Friday of every month. We'll try to get those announcements out sooner so you are aware of it in advance. But if you can participate live, we had a few people participating live last month. If you can participate live, please do. It's a great opportunity for you to ask questions and also hear from some others usually who are live on the call. And this is just something we're doing to try to provide some more value to you, our customers. And well, thanks for watching this video. Hope you found it useful and valuable. Hopefully you will be able to make your environment the best it can be so that we can continue to make your podcast audio the absolute best professional sounding audio it can be. If you have any questions, reach out to us. Do not forget to check out the Feed Your Brand podcast. If you're not already subscribing to that, I highly recommend you do that. That every week we go over subjects that should be likely of interest to any of you that are podcasting and brandcasting with us, as well as others who are not yet podcasting. But check that out. And I have no more questions, so I'm going to sign off. So this is Tom from Brandcasters saying, I'll talk to you next time. Thanks so much for participating. Bye.